Welcome to Ali's channel. Today we're going to be freeze drying eggs. I have an older version of the medium-sized Harvest Right freeze dryer which only has 4 trays. So I'm going to be using 18 eggs per tray for a total of 72 eggs. Before adding the eggs to a bowl, make sure you always break them on a different plate. This is to make sure the eggs are good. In case you get a bad egg, you're able to throw it away without contaminating the rest. Once you have 18 eggs in a bowl, I always like to mix them. If you put them as they are in a freeze dryer, the yolks will take much longer to freeze dry. So I always like to mix them well before I pour them into the trays. In this case, I am going to be pre-freezing the trays. This is to save time on the freeze dryer. I usually do this at night, so the next morning they are ready for me to transfer them into the freeze dryer to start processing them. And like I said, we have 4 different trays, so I am going to be filling up the rest of the trays with, again, 18 eggs each. I'm going to be filling up the trays that are already in the freezer. This is much easier since if you do it in your counter, you may have an issue transferring them. If they are too full, you may spill the eggs, so it makes it much easier to place the empty trays in the freezer and then do the different batches of the liquid eggs once they are inside. Once all 4 trays are filled, I'm going to leave them in the freezer overnight or for at least 6 hours. In my case, I usually do this process at night, and the next morning they are totally frozen and ready to be placed inside the freeze dryer. You do not have to pre-freeze the eggs. This is totally optional. You can simply put them inside the freeze dryer and the machine will freeze them and then dry them. But I do this to save some time in the machine. As you can see, the total processing time for 72 eggs took about 33 hours. You can also add additional extra dry time. This is in case you are not going to be home when the process is going to be done, or if it's going to end sometime at midnight. So this helps to make sure that there is no moisture that goes back into your food if the process ends and you are not there to take the food out. The way I'm going to be saving these eggs is in the form of powder. You can use a blender, but to be honest, the eggs are so light and fluffy that you do not need a blender. All I do is transfer them into a Ziploc bag and then I squeeze them with my hands. Make sure you take most of the air out so it is easier to handle the bag, and make sure they turn into powder. Again, you can do this as well using a blender, but I feel it's an overkill because, as you can see, as soon as you squish those eggs, they turn right away into a semi-fine powder. You can store the eggs in Mylar bags or mason jars. Usually I use Mylar bags when I'm going to be storing food for long-term storage. In this case, for eggs, they can last up to 25 years after they have been freeze-dried, as long as you make sure you have an oxygen absorbent, it's completely sealed, and you keep it in a fresh place. You can also store eggs in mason jars, but I do this normally when I'm going to be keeping them for medium or to short term. Just in case one day I run out of eggs and I can't go to the store, I simply use the ones I have in a mason jar. But I also use an oxygen absorbent when I use the mason jars. This is to be safe and make sure that the eggs last as long as possible on my shelves. Once I have transferred all the eggs into Mylar bags, I usually date them and label them to make sure I know what's inside and the date that they were processed. And again, just keep them in a cool place and they should be good for about 25 years. To rehydrate the eggs, I'm going to be using 2 tablespoons of egg powder to 3 tablespoons of water. If you want to have them a little bit less liquidy, you can test and do first just 2 tablespoons of egg powder and 2 tablespoons of water and test it. If you feel that they are too thick and you want it a little bit more liquid, just add more water. You can always add more egg powder in case they turn too liquidy. Since I'm going to be making an omelette, I decided to go with 2 tablespoons of eggs and 3 tablespoons of water. Since this is just for testing purposes, I'm only using salt and pepper, but obviously you can use, just like with any regular eggs, you can add additional ingredients, onions, potatoes, peppers, whatever you want. But in this case, like I said, to make it a little bit simpler, I just added salt and pepper. And as you can see, you get the exact same consistency as if you were using regular fresh eggs. I am adding some chorizo, but you can add, like I said, any vegetables or some cheese, whatever you like. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe.